All right, welcome to the Chicago Archaeological Society. For those that are not familiar with us, our group has a long history. From oral tradition, I understand we started way back in the 1920s when archaeology was still fairly new. Sometime after 1940, Harriet Smith, one of the first female archaeologists who was involved in our group, and she was a director of the first professional large-scale excavations at Cahokia Mountains. By at least 1962, the name the Chicago Archaeological Society was being used, and our mission to study the existence of man had been established. After 1969, we became a chapter of the Illinois Association for the Advancement of Archaeology, the IAAA. At this point, the mission was further expanded to unite all persons interested in archaeology of Illinois, amateurs, professionals, students, and educators. By at least 1987, we were a paper organization with the state of Illinois. And in short, like the IAAA, we do focus on regional areas of interest, but in the pursuit of understanding all of mankind, we cover topics outside of Illinois, such as the ancient Americas, the Mayas, Egypt, China, all over. For those of you that are not a member of the Chicago Archaeological Society, we hope that you join. And by joining our organization, you also join the IAAA, the Illinois Association for the Advancement of Archaeology. As a member, you will receive a newsletter, the Codex, which covers past and future lectures, plus news and events related to archaeology, anthropology, and history. You'll get our newsletter, and in addition, you will get Illinois Antiquity, a journal from Illinois Association of Advancement of Archaeology that has wonderful articles and photos from the work that's being done in the state of Illinois. If you'd like to know more and you'd like to join our organization, please go to chicagoarchaeologysociety.com and select join. That's chicagoarchaeologicalsociety.com and select join. All right, and I want to say thank you to all of our members. You are the lifeblood of this organization. You're the ones that keep this thing going year after year. So thank you. And for those that are interested, please join. All right, so I would ask that during the lecture, please mute yourself, and then you can put your questions in chat so we can review them as the meeting's going along. And then at the end of the meeting, if you feel comfortable, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or just put them in the chat and I'll read it for you. So today we have a fellow member, Michael Ruggeri, Professor Emeritus of the Professor Emeritus of the City of Chicago, City Colleges of Chicago. He is a moderator of the largest and oldest Ancient America listserv on the World Wide Web, Astalon. He also moderates an Andean list and Mound Builder list. Mike serves as a board member of the Illinois Association for the Advancement of Archaeology and a board member of the Chicago Archaeological Society. He has taught courses on Mesoamerica, Mexican history, Latin American history, among other courses, in his 33 years as a teacher. He maintains over 50 different web pages on all aspects of ancient Americas. For the Chicago Archaeological Society, he contributes as a regular columnist in our newsletter, the Codex, and has given many lectures to our society on the various ancient America topics. Today, Michael Ruggeri will take you on a journey, a wide-ranging illustrated lecture of the mysterious doors from New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Chihuahua, and Sierra Madre, as he begins to explain the enigma of T-shaped doors. Please welcome Michael Ruggeri.
Thanks, Ray, for that great introduction. And today we're going to be talking about this widespread phenomena of the T-shaped doors that stretch from Utah all the way down to deep Chihuahua State, Mexico. And there are thousands of these doors in this huge area of the American Southwest and into Mexico. And these T-shaped doors have never been actually studied for what they're about, what's their mysterious meaning, why there were so many, and why this phenomena of the T-shaped doors spread so widely. And archaeology sometimes is pretty slow because pre-Clovis, for instance, when we started studying pre-Clovis culture in the Americas, archaeologists didn't really begin to study it until about 1970, when the site of Monteverde in southern Chile was uncovered and became the first proven pre-Clovis site in the Americas, stretching back 1,000 years before the Clovis period. And so this particular aspect of the ancient Americas, the T-shaped doors, has never been studied until very recently, only in the last few years. And almost all of the studies that have been done so far by one great ancient Southwest archaeologist and historian, Steve Lexon, who I owe most of my information on this to, because the fact that there's not much research being done, as a matter of fact, almost no research being done, I have to rely on only a few sources in order for me to get across the material that he has compiled and I have compiled since I learned from him. And at the end of the lecture, you're going to be hearing about a new archaeologist in the Maya world who may have hit upon some explanation as to why these T-shaped doors are so extant and what their meaning is. So we'll learn that at the end of the lecture. And so we begin this lecture with a picture of a T-shaped door, so you know what I'm talking about right there. That window on your screen is what we call a T-shaped door, and that's the shape that you're going to see of these kinds of doors throughout this lecture. And this particular one happens to be one of the farthest northern ones. This is in the Hovenweep site in Utah. Now, I'm going to skip this just for time. Do that. All right, let's not skip this one. 1 second. Stuck here. Okay. When we talk about the extent of T-shaped doors, we're talking about an area of the ancient Americas world that we call Oasis America. And as you can see from this map, it stretches from Chihuahua, the Mexican state of Chihuahua in the south, up into Sonora in the northwest quadrant of Mexico and into the ancient Southwest, Baja California, right across the bay, the Gulf of California, and into Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, and California. So it's a very wide area of the world. And in this wide area, you see T-shaped doors everywhere. The first T-shaped doors in all of the ancient Southwest are found at a site called Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, whose dates were 828 to 1126 CE. And as you can see, it's quite a striking archaeological and architectural site. It just jumps out at you when you see it. Lots of stuff going on in this site for hundreds of years before that culture, the Chaco culture, began to disappear around 1126 AD. But it was within this culture that the first T-shaped doors began to appear in the entire Oasis America area, starting in 850 CE. And here's one of the first T-shaped doors here at Pueblo Bonito on your right, giant T-shaped door. And so far at Chaco Canyon, at Pueblo Bonito, they found 24 of these T-shaped doors. Some of them grand doors like this one, others still fairly large. And we know from studying the 24 doors that have been found at Pueblo Bonito that every one of them either faced a big plaza on the outside, like you're looking at here at Pueblo Bonito, or they came outside of an aristocratic home. So they were all large T-shaped doors, the larger ones stretching out onto great plazas, and not quite as large, but still very large T-shaped doors that were the doors that let you into aristocratic quarters. So we know at Chaco that these were doors meant for aristocracy and meant for great ritual. And that's why these doors are so large at Chaco. What they meant, we didn't know, and we still are not clear about what they meant. As we go through this lecture, you'll find out more. And this is one of the T-shaped doors at Pueblo Bonito that, as you can see, is Not quite as large as the one you just saw, but it is the doorway to an aristocratic home that stretches out into the inside of this wall. Now, at the end of the Chaco culture, a new culture began to emerge further to the north. And the biggest site there, Mesa Verde, you're looking at here, another dynamic, interesting site with lots of stuff going on historically in Colorado. And you can see in the walls, in the slide I'm showing you here, there are various T-shaped door designs that emanate from Chaco in the beginning. And what has happened, and you'll find out as we go along, is that when Chaco collapsed, a great number of migrants moved north to this area, and they rebuilt sites in the image of Chaco, and they brought the T-shaped doors with them. Now, Steve Luxon points out to us that at Mesa Verde, things began to happen that changed the dynamic of these doors. First of all, there were more of them. And second of all, the great majority of these doors no longer were just great doors that led out into great plazas or great doors that led into aristocratic homes, but they became democratized. More and more ordinary people as an entrance into their home, the T-shaped door. So for some reason, it became less mighty, less majestic, less aristocratic, and more democratic in the way they designed these T-shaped doors, and it allowed lower down folks in the class order to have T-shaped doors as entrances to their homes. So we know that happened. Why it happened is not known, but it began to happen here. Another huge site in New Mexico, Aztec ruins, it is called. You can see a T-shaped door over there on the right. It's dates 1250 to 1350 CE. Another emanation from Chaco in this second period of site building and T-shaped doors in Oasis, America. And here's one of the big T-shaped doors at Aztec ruins, as you can see in this slide. At Aztec ruins, there was also really nicely preserved Great Kiva. When you saw the first slide that I showed you of Chaco Canyon, you saw that there were these big round elements built at the top here, and they stretched into the underground. And these are kivas. And there's thousands of kivas throughout the ancient Southwest. And what they were meeting sites, meeting grounds for the aristocratic military elite. So they were like churches. They were like worshiping places. They were like male fraternities. They were like bonding places for the male warriors of that particular tribe or tribes that occupied those sites. And so that's what you're looking at here at Chaco. You're seeing very large kivas and then smaller kivas for other smaller male fraternities. And so you have this great kiva nicely restored at Aztec ruins. You can see what it looked like on the inside. And you can see you had to come down from the top on a set of stairs, and you had seating elements on the left and the right made of some kind of stone that they could polish real nicely. A fire was probably lit there in that little altar in the center that you see. And they would commune with the spirits, they would commune with the gods, they would probably get high on psychedelic drugs, they would bond with one another, they would go through the rituals, and then they would go into battle. So that's what these great kivas were about. And so it's a very nice kiva here at Aztec ruins. Another site that you're looking at here is the Hovenweep site that I showed you in the original slide in Utah, way far north. And as you can see, the T-shaped door that you're now becoming familiar with at Hovenweep. And another site, cliff dwelling site in Arizona called Montezuma's Castle. The archaeologists called it Montezuma's Castle at its discovery because they thought it had something to do with the Aztecs. And the dates for this cliff dwelling site, 1100 to 1425 CE. And as you can see at this cliff dwelling site, a very large T-shaped door here in the center right. And there's some other there's a T-shaped door above that in the gray stone area that you're looking at. And one of the interesting things about these cliff dwellings is that as you got more regular warfare taking place in this area in the ancient Southwest between tribes, as more and more migrants came in and more folks who are more barbarian types came in from the north, they began to have troubles with defending their sites. And so they moved the main elements of their sites way up into the cliff sides. And the only way you could reach these cliff sides was by way of rope ladders. And so when enemies came, they just brought those rope ladders up. So it was almost impossible for the enemies to, they either had to come from the top or they had to somehow climb the mountain to get to the main elements of these sites. So it was a very good defensive posture to build these cliff dwellings. And that's what this was about. But even in the cliff dwellings, they built these T-shaped doors. So the T-shaped doors remains very important to them, no matter where they built their site. And no matter how they built their site, the T-shaped doors came with them. And that's what's surprising about this whole enterprise of studying this phenomena. No one has tried to figure out until Steve Lexon just a couple of years ago why this is and why the T-shaped doors are so important and what they mean. So it's archaeology sometimes moves in very, very slow ways. And we're going to get to the meaning of this more and more as this phenomena of the T-shaped doors becomes extant in the culture of archaeology in the ancient Southwest. Here you see on that, in that gray area, you see on the side there, that T-shaped door that I pointed you to at the beginning when you looked at this, the last slide. And again, very important that this T-shaped door appears in main places everywhere in all of these sites, including the cliff dwelling sites. And then late in the era of Oasis America, from 1350 to 1450, this great site in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, Paquimé, sprang up. And as you can see, it looks Southwest in style because it emanates from the Southwest. People began to move as cultures disintegrated in the US side of the ancient Southwest, and as more warfare continued in that area of the world. Migrants moved from Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado and California down into Paquimé, down into the state of Chihuahua, and built this great site of Paquimé. And that's when the T-shaped doors became immensely democratized. Everybody had T-shaped doors. There's several hundred T-shaped doors that have been uncovered at Paquimé. So T-shaped doors were for everybody, every kind of dwelling, every kind of ritual place, every kind of opening had T-shaped doors. So it becomes widely popular there, almost overwhelming in style. And again, why nobody studied this until very recently is a great mystery in itself. Now, something about how they constructed Paquimé in this late period, 1350 to 1450 AD. We've counted so far 2,000 separate rooms at Paquimé. It's in a desert area, so they had to build very extensive and very complicated water control systems. We find ball courts at Paquimé. The ancient Southwest had ball courts. Mexico had ball courts. The ball courts itself emanate from very early on in Mesoamerican history, from the time of the Maya and the Mexica people. So they go back into all the way back to BC times. And so Paquimé, being part of Mesoamerica, obviously has ball courts, and those ball courts have been found also in the ancient Southwest. There's some small effigy mounds that have been uncovered at Paquimé, large markets, and a population at its greatest height of about 10,000 people. And at that site, it was an entrepot. It was a central marketplace for trade moving from deep in the jungles of Mexico all the way up into Utah in terms of this Oasis America trading area. And so they specialized in making, designing copper bells at Paquimé that they would trade further north. They created Casas Grandes pottery, a very unique kind of pottery, very beautiful, that they could trade with the people further north in return for turquoise and other items that they needed from the north for their livelihoods. They created effigy bowls. You'll see those. Effigy bowls are bowls that are made in the shape of humans or gods or animals. And they traded all these items, including scarlet macaws, cotton, and chocolate, other items from deeper in Mexico all the way into the Southwest. They had condo buildings. The biggest condo buildings at Pakime were 7 stories. And again, they were a trading post for scarlet macaws so that folks would come as far away from the jungles of the Gulf Coast carrying live scarlet macaws with them by walking. Remember, there's no horses, there's no wheels. So they have to walk all the way from the jungles of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, all the way through the Central Highland mountain areas, all the way through the deserts, up to Pakime, and bring live macaws with them, which was quite a feat. And somebody is making noise there. All right. And then those scarlet macaws would be traded to the people in the ancient Southwest, places like Chaco, where they would pull the feathers of these scarlet macaws to make headdresses, to make shields, to make all kinds of fancy ritual items made from these very beautiful, very colorful scarlet macaw feathers, which fetched a great price in trade from Pakime into Arizona, New Mexico, and so on. And we also find that they had turkey pens there. And in the Southwest, in the ancient Southwest, they used turkey feathers to make blankets and to make. And so it was a very important area that united and brought together and bonded Mesoamerica with over the border, over the mountains, over the rivers, over the desert into the ancient Southwest. And here's an example of a number of cascading T-shaped doors, one behind the other at Pakime. So they were crazy about building these T-shaped doors. And as I said, I think there were some 240 of these T-shaped doors found at Pakime so far, and yet no one has yet, until very recently, tried to figure out why they were so popular, why they had to make so many of them, and there had to be some kind of very deep ritual meaning behind them because they spread out so far and over centuries. Again, here's some more Pakime T-shaped doors, one on the left. The one on the right probably rounded a little bit by way of settlement of the square space at the top. But again, two shaped doors, two T-shaped doors in one wall there. Now, great discovery made just a few years ago at Pakime was a T-shape that was not a door. And it was placed in a ritual area where people might, worship, kneel down and worship. It was an actual altar. So at Pakime, we see the evidence that these aren't only revered as doors, but they actually made an altar of a T-shaped door at Pakime. So we know that the meaning of these T-shaped doors are religious, they're spiritual, something is very important about them other than doors. And we're finding this out for the first time by way of looking at this T-shaped door altar at Pakime. Now, we talked about the Pakime potteries. You can see there was an interchange of styles back and forth. Since Pakime comes later, there were great pottery styles in the ancient Southwest. Obviously, you've seen a lot of these ancient Southwest pots, the Anasazi pots and the Hohokam pots and so on. And they were very stylistic and very colorful and very unique. And so they traded these pots further south into Mesoamerica. And the people of Pakime saw these pots over time. And then they began to develop from the Southwest style their own style of pottery that is also very unique, very different from the ancient Southwest, but also in many ways very similar because the style emanates from the ancient Southwest. We can figure out some of these patterns. This pattern here, the jagged pattern would be rain or thunder or lightning. These rounded elements on here would be, again, rain, thunder, and wind. Very important to people in the desert, so they're putting it on their pottery. And on the right here, you have an effigy pot. Again, it's a woman for sure. She's either a goddess or she's just a effigy of a human female, and she's holding in ancient America style that pot in her arms. All the way through the ancient Americas, you see women holding these little pots because they contain corn or other food elements within them. And you can see that she's got scarification or tattoos on her cheeks, and they're barbed. And so they're probably meant to be, again, some meaning behind some goddess that might be a dangerous goddess to approach because of those barbs on her tattoos on her face, the scarification on her face. You see that on her upper chest there, she has lightning symbols. On her knees, she's got rain symbols, wind symbols. So this very well may be a rain goddess of some kind if you put this all together in terms of the human effigy, Pakime pottery. And I told you how folks, traders all the way from the Gulf Coast jungles of Mesoamerica brought scarlet macaws by hand, kept them alive all the way to Pakime. Covered these scarlet macaw pens where they held them there and used them to raise more, and then to again trade them to the Southwest for the scarlet feathers that the people in the Southwest got for important items that they wanted at Pakime and further south in Mesoamerica. Scarlet macaw pens. Now, alongside of the sites that you have in the ancient Southwest and the sites that you have at Pakime, there were also a huge number of cliff-dwelling cultures outside of this main area, in the mountain area of the Sierra Madre. And they traded all over Mesoamerica from their cliff-dwelling sites. As you can see from this map here, a number of the large cliff-dwelling sites that are part of the Sierra Madre culture, you can see here, Pakime being in the center there. These sites are either, some of them are 60 miles to the north, and some of them go far as 200 miles to the south. So it's a very wide area of cliff-dwelling sites in the Sierra Madre and this cliff-dwelling culture. And again, it indicates obviously that there was a lot of warfare going on in this area. And so you had the need for a huge number of cliff-dwelling defensive placements to ward against the enemies that were coming in either from the north or from the south. And these folks in the Sierra Madre traded across the Gulf of California with the folks in Baja California as well. So some of the Mesoamerican and ancient Southwest styles get traded into the Baja area so that you have a mixture of these two cultures. And again, they expanded their trade all the way to Chaco, 850 CE into New Mexico and Mesa Verde by 1350 CE. And defensive systems begin to be built all the way through this area by the time you get to 1350, 1450 AD. Now, I just wanted to show you this map of this area down in this Sierra Madres area. And you can see that at the top here, there's Hub and Weep over here, not listed on this map in Utah, Mesa Verde in Colorado, Aztec ruins on the Arizona-Colorado border, Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, way far north in New Mexico, and down here, many sites like Cuarentacasas, cliff-dwelling sites in Chihuahua and in Sonora. Here's one of these great cliff-dwelling sites in the Sierra Madres, Cuarentacasas site. As you can see, again, in this cliff-dwelling site that's about 60 miles or so from Pakime, built into a cliff. Again, there is that T-shaped door, which is an important element of all construction in this entire area of the Oasis America. And that very round bulbous structure you see on the left was a granary. Now you might ask, how could it be that you would have holes in a granary? Well, those holes were probably poked into that granary from time to time. They weren't built in when they first built this granary, but that's the way they would save their food. They would bring the grain from agricultural areas on the ground level and save it up into these big food containers up on the top of the cliff dwelling, but still with the T-shaped door. Another great cliff dwelling site called La Rancheria in Chihuahua. This is about 200 miles south of Pakime, way south. And again, you see, like Mesa Verde in 1350 AD, around 1350 AD CE, you have something that looks like a miniature Mesa Verde here at La Rancheria. And again, you see on the far right, T-shaped door. There's T-shaped doors extend throughout into this entire site. So even 200 miles south, you're beginning to see these T-shaped doors still there as an important element in the architecture of the Sierra Madre. I want you to remember this one. This is in cliff dwelling site called Cuevas de las Ventanas, the cave of the windows, and adjoining it, a place called the Serpent Cave. And on the left, you see there are wall murals, wall paintings of a serpent. And you see little human elements, effigies, gods or goddesses emanating from that serpent. Oops. And I want you to remember that, because that's going to be an important element in what these doors mean when we start to guess about them at the end of this lecture. Hooking the plumed serpent, very important element in all of Mesoamerica and all the way up into the ancient Southwest, to this idea possibly of T-shaped doors. We begin to see the development of the idea that the plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl as he's called in Mesoamerica, tied to these T-shaped doors. And as you can see from the photo on your left, in this Cuevas de las Ventanas, lots of windows, and most of these windows are T-shaped doors. And by the way, this wall painting over on your left of the plumed serpent, it was draped over a T-shaped door. I couldn't get a photo anywhere of the T-shaped door underneath this. So just trust me that it was there. So there's a connection artistically in many ways between the plumed serpent and T-shaped doors at this site. So we're beginning to see why the T-shaped doors may have meaning beyond just doorways. And we saw with that T-shaped altar at Paquime that it was more than just a T-shaped altar, is more than just a doorway. It's something revered. Another cliff dwelling site in the Sierra Madre, Cueva Grande. And once again, you can see centrally embellished here, centrally placed the T-shaped door at Cueva Grande. And again, why is it so important that no matter where you go here, there's always T-shaped doors, and why wasn't it studied until Steve Lexon started to look into this very recently? Strange thing in archaeology that some things are just overlooked. Now, at Chaco, in the largest room at Chaco, they uncovered these cups. And again, another reference to how important these T-shaped elements were, that not just doors, an altar at Paquime, but now you have cups with the T-shape embellished in the handles of these cups. So now we know again from finding these T-shaped handled cups that obviously this is a spiritual element that's very meaningful to all of the people in Oasis America. So important that they embellish the T-shaped door, even in their cups, in the handles of the cups, in these very artistic styles. And you're looking at the center cup here, you see star elements. And then there's the T-shape that's carved into the star elements. And so we're beginning to see here that that T-shaped door has a cosmic element related to it. What the cosmic element is, whether it's from ideas in Mesoamerica about the planet Venus, whether it has something to do with Quetzalcoatl, perhaps we're beginning to see some answers to the riddle here. And we see again, because remember, these are desert people, all kinds of storm symbols, lightning symbols, rain symbols, etched and painted into these cups, into this pottery. But T-shaped cup symbolism. Now, are there a lot of cave paintings in the ancient Southwest that have T-shaped doors painted on them? Now, that hasn't been known for a long time. People just started looking for them recently. I saw a Zoom of a conference about paintings in the ancient Southwest, and there were archaeologists in the audience who said they've seen so far 3 T-shaped door paintings, wall paintings, murals, in the murals that they've studied in the ancient Southwest. So they'll probably find more now that they're looking for it. But I want you to remember the elements involved in this particular T-shaped door cave painting. And the guy that showed this at the conference didn't tell us whether it was Mexico or Arizona, Colorado. So, and I have no reference to where it was found, but somewhere in the ancient Southwest in the wall paintings. You have this T-shaped door. Then you have a rain element to the left. You see the rain, lightning, thunder element. And then over to the right, the plume serpent. And so once again, just like the cave painting that you saw in the Sierra Madre cliff dwelling, the plume serpent is tied to the T-shaped door that's tied to rain, lightning, thunder, and wind. So as we begin to look at these elements in a whole now, as we begin to first study them, we're beginning to put together clues as to what exactly these T-shaped doors may have meant. It's becoming more clear. And as we get to the end of this lecture, I will bring it to a conclusion here in terms of putting these elements together and having some answers as to what this all means and whether we've discovered what the T-shape is about. Now, another interesting feature of the whole study of this area that Steve Lexon and another archaeologist also claims he's going to come to me. His name is going to come to me in a minute. It's not in my mind right now, but Steve Lexon wrote a whole book about this, what's called the Chaco Meridian. Jay Jacobs is the other archaeologist. Jay Jacobs said he's the one that coined the term Chaco Meridian and figured this out, but Steve Lexon has written an entire book plus a lot of chapters and other books about this meridian. What is this meridian about and why is it so important in terms of looking at this whole phenomena of not only T-shaped doors, but the movement of Southwest peoples, and why when one culture disintegrated, it pops up someplace else just as extant, just as fluorescent as the cultures that dissolved. And then when those cultures dissolve, it pops up somewhere else. And with the same elements and with great vibrancy, one culture ending, the other culture beginning, but all of the same style, all of the same idea, all of the same religious symbolism, and all with T-shaped doors. So as J.J. Jacobs and Steve Lexon explains this phenomena, you have here the beginning at Chaco. And so here's Chaco. And so 850 AD T-shaped doors begin to be designed for the first time at Chaco, around 850 AD. And around 1125 AD, that culture disintegrates. But as it disintegrates, we begin to see up here to the north, the Aztec ruins, Mesa Verde area, the reflorescence of what was at Chaco. So as soon as Chaco disintegrated, you begin to have these large ruins, these large sites, 1125 to 1350, that look like the sites in the Chaco Canyon, that have a lot of the same kinds of architecture, a lot of the same kinds of pottery, a lot of the same kinds of trade goods, a lot of the same types of T-shaped doors. But now, as Chaco is gone and the Chaco culture is gone, it suddenly reappears almost instantaneously to the north at Aztec ruins and Mesa Verde and the other sites to the north. And those sites begin to disintegrate at around 1350 AD for one reason or another. They're gone, no more building up there. And suddenly, all the way down here at Paquime, starting in 1375 to 1450, you have again the re-emanation, the reflorescence of everything we've been talking about way to the south of Chaco, way to the south of those sites, way to the north, Mesa Verde and Aztec ruins and the others. And so what's the distance between the furthermost north to the Paquime? About 1,200 miles, 1,200 miles. And remember, they're walking, no wheels, no horses, so they have to walk from place to place. From Chaco all the way up to Mesa Verde and Aztec ruins and the others, about 125 miles. So Lexon and J.J. Jacobs show us that this structure of time, this reflorescence of sites, occurs in an almost straight line of development, as you can see here, that they call the Chaco Meridian. They don't go west or east, they go in a straight line. So when Chaco disintegrates, the folks migrate from there in a straight line, almost as if they're following some kind of cosmic symbol or ritual path, some kind of pilgrimage that is meaningful to them, directly north to these sites at Aztec ruins and Mesa Verde and the other sites in the north. And then when they collapsed. Amazingly enough, these folks migrate 1,200 miles walking in a straight line to Pakime, not deviating. And in terms of the deviation, the real deviation, it's within, in terms of elements, architectural elements. I don't know what the geological elements and so on. It's almost a straight line, very little deviation. And so here they left Chaco, moved to the north. When those sites in the north disintegrated, they, for some reason, in a straight line, they walk 1,200 miles to reinvigorate this little site at the time, this little Mesoamerican desert village, the site that became this great site of Pakime, along with all of those T-shaped doors, as you saw, and with all these elements of the ancient Southwest culture and Mesoamerican culture mixed in. So that's another amazing phenomenon. And again, J.J. Jacobs and Steve Lexon, they're writing about this phenomena around the 1960s, maybe early 1970s. And so they came to the realization very late of this great archaeological phenomena of this straight line, of this Chaco meridian that ties all of these cultures together in a straight line with all of the cultural elements tied to this. Now, we come to the strange end of the story. How far back do these T-shaped elements really occur? Where can we find these T-shaped elements outside of the desert area of Chihuahua? And now we have an archaeologist of the Maya, a Maya expert by the name of Mark Callis, who is one of the world-renowned experts on the site of Palenque, which is in Chiapas, way in the jungles of Chiapas, of Mesoamerica. And you have this magnificent site of Palenque. And here at Palenque, Mark Callis showed us there were T-shaped windows. And these T-shaped windows were constructed around 600 AD, 600 CE. Now, Callis knows Maya glyphs, and so he begins to theorize that the T shape comes from deep in Mesoamerica in the jungles of Chiapas, from the Maya glyph that's called Ik. And Ik stands for wind, wind breath, blowing of the wind, rain, life, because rain gives life, and spirit, some kind of spiritual element. And as you can see from this Maya glyph Ik, in the middle of these T-shaped, not T-shaped glyphs, in the middle of these Maya glyphs, you see the T-shape. And so Callis begins to believe that the meaning behind the T-shape springs from these Maya glyphs that go far back into BC times, and that you find in the windows at Palenque starting around 600 CE. And they're related to this Maya glyph that means wind and rain and life and spirit. And of course, it would be meaningful to people in the ancient Southwest and the people of the deserts in Chihuahua, because wind and rain and life and spirit would be elements of life and death for them. Now, how would this Maya glyph translate into 850 AD T-shaped doors at Chaco? Well, it's a much shorter distance between, despite the fact that it's in Chiapas in the jungles of Mexico, it's a much shorter distance between the site of Palenque into the Pakime area than it is between the furthest north sites in the ancient Southwest down at Pakime. So Maya glyphs could travel. The idea of Maya glyphs could travel. People would be trading from this area into the Pakime area, and the Pakime area would be trading into the ancient Southwest and back and forth. And so the Maya glyph here, as far as Mark Callis is concerned, is the answer to what these glyphs are about, where they emanated from and what they mean. And there you're looking at it on my screen, what they're about. And here are some photos of these T-shaped windows at Palenque. 250 to 950 CE were the dates for Palenque, and somewhere in there 300, 400 CE, maybe 600 CE. you began to see these T-shaped windows. So obviously the T-shape exists way in the jungles of Chiapas, hundreds of years before they begin to appear at Chaco. So let's say, give a rough estimate that the T-shaped windows begin to appear at Palenque at 400. The first T-shaped doors in the ancient Southwest, 850 at Chaco. So there's several centuries in between one and the other. But remember, all through that period of time, there's trade going on between the Maya areas further to the east and the Maya and then the Central Highland areas further to the west. And so, and Maya glyphs would travel with them. And this idea of wind, rain, and spirit would travel with them. And then that would travel by way of trade and ideas, Mesoamerican ideas, into the Southwest. So that is giving us perhaps the final and real meaning of what these T-shaped doors, the meaning behind them, are about. Here's another one of these windows at Palenque. I think 12 or 13 of these windows have been found at Palenque so far. Now, I want to bring you back to this idea of the plumed serpent and its relationship to the T-shaped doors. We already know now about the Maya relationship to the T-shaped doors. What about the plumed serpent relationship to the T-shaped doors? Here you have, just as a colorful and artistic representation of the plumed serpent, I'm showing you at the plumed serpent pyramid temple at Teotihuacan. These beautifully carved, beautifully spiritually charged artistic representations of the plumed serpent. You see the plumes behind him, and you see the serpent's face coming in front of you, the plumed serpent temple at Teotihuacan and the plumed serpent. So what does this have to do with T-shaped doors? We'll get to that. And I just wanted to talk about how, where did the plumed serpent emanate from? How far back did that idea come from in terms of Mesoamerican iconography and religion? Well, we're going all the way back to the time of the mother culture in Mesoamerica, the Olmecs, when we first begin to see this plumed serpent carved in these beautiful monoliths from the Olmec area. This particular one was found at the Maya site at La Venta, and this piece of art would have been carved around 600 BC at the Olmec site of La Venta. So you see the plumed serpent surrounding, in the middle, a shaman or a priest, and I'll talk about why we know that this is a shaman or a priest as we go forward. But it looks like he's sitting in the womb of the plumed serpent, this priest. And how do we know he's a priest? Because in his hand, he's got this little bag that all priestly images in Mesoamerica often carried these little bags. Probably they were incense bags, and they probably also contained psychedelic drugs for the use of religious rituals. And as you can see, he is embellished with a face mask that may be either the plumed serpent again as his face mask or some other Mesoamerican deity. There you see the face of the priest. And another element of Olmec styles and Olmec iconography. In the Olmec world, priests, important personages, often were shown wearing these large capes. And so that's where the plumed serpent becomes very important, 600 BC at La Venta and throughout the Olmec world at that time, all the way up to the idea of the T-shaped door that we find and that you saw in the elements that we found in the Sierra Madre, in the plumed serpent, the serpent, the cliff dwelling of the serpent. You saw the plumed serpent there, and that plumed serpent was painted over a T-shaped door. And you saw in the cave paintings how the T-shaped door is related to the plumed serpent, is related to wind and rain and spirit. So again, we see a tying together of Mesoamerican elements, Maya elements, Central Mexican elements, Quetzalcoatl, for instance, with the ancient Southwest elements. one more here. It's gone. All right. So, all right, let me just explain what I'm missing here. If I can put this together without you seeing it. Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god of the central highlands of Mexico, he's often shown with a big mask, what they call a buccal mask in terms of the iconography of central highlands. And he's blowing out wind. And that wind brings life and spirit and rain, life-giving. He is a creation god, among other things, Quetzalcoatl. And we saw with the Maya glyph that it's wind, rain, spirit, and life. I'm sorry, I don't have that picture, but I'm explaining it to you. So we're now beginning to see finally in the end of this lecture that Quetzalcoatl, the central Mexican plumed serpent god, stretches all the way back to the time of the Olmecs, but in his imagery and in his iconography, he's shown with this big wind mask blowing out wind to bring life to mankind, to bring rain to mankind, to bring spirit to mankind, to create mankind. And we see in the Maya glyphs, in the Maya glyph of Ik, that it means life and spirit and wind and rain. And so that's where it ends, my lecture on what these T-shaped doors mean. You can see now that just in the very recent past, and I've been able to put together a few elements here that Steve Lexon and J.J. Jacobs haven't shown us yet because of my knowledge of things that were going on in terms of iconography in Mesoamerica, how you can tie the plumed serpent to the Maya glyph and to these T-shaped doors and their meanings in the ancient Southwest. And so we're going to find out more about this T-shaped door as we go forward, but this is, you're becoming world-class experts, because what I have told you today is more than anyone in the archaeological world knows about T-shaped doors. This is it. This is the extent of our knowledge, and we're going to find out more as we go along. So that's the end of my lecture, and I'm ready for questions and answers. If you can unmute, Ray. Ray, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So, hello?
Okay, I'm ready for any questions and answers.
Wonderful.
Or any
All right.
or any feedback on what I just presented.
All right. So I got a comment from Tom. Nicely done, especially the intrigue of the glyph and serpent connection. I have to go to okay, never mind. So anyway, so yeah, interesting about the glyph and serpent connections was a comment there. So yeah, anybody that would like to make a comment now, please put that in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, unmute yourself and ask it now.
Somebody asked what's the time frame for the appearance of the T-shaped doors in the Chaco Canyon cylinder jars. Yeah, they're basically in that same room. They found the cylinder jars that they found references to T-shaped doors. The T-shaped door led into that room. And in that room, they found these cylinder jars. And in the cylinder jars, just recently, they found evidence that chocolate was contained in these cylinder jars. And this chocolate was brought by way of trade, again, all the way from deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica, all the way up to the ancient Southwest. So that, yes, they were at the same time.
We have a question. 46 years ago, I was at a site that I thought was called Nuevo Casa Grandes. Is that different from Casa Grandes?
There's a site in Arizona called just Casa Grande, and that's Nuevo. I mean, it's called Casa Grande, but it's not. Paquime is also called archaeological English terms Casas Grandes. So it's got two names: Paquime, the Mesoamerican name, and Casas Grandes, the North America name for Paquime is Casas Grandes. And then in Arizona, you have a small site called Casa Grande. That's Nuevo. That's
and the guy told her that the doors were set up for defensive measures, so that you'd have to enter single file. Does it sound like a good theory, or just a tour guide ranting?
As you saw from those giant ones,
Mhm.
a lot of people could get through those doors. So I doubt
Okay.
the defensive element. Only defensive element I see here is that they appear in these cliff dwellings, but not as elements to keep out invaders. That's for sure. So no, I don't see those doors as a defensive element.
And Jeannie comments in Dr. Joel Polka's class at UIC. He discussed a possible connection between the IK Mayan glyph for beneath the wind and the T-shaped doors. A possible connection.
And I talked about that.
Between connection between breath and life in large scale and small scale art symbolism.
And exactly, that's what this whole idea of the Ekglyph, plus the idea of the plumed serpent blowing out wind and rain and so on. And you see that that cave painting I showed you, that tied the plumed serpent to the wind and to the T-shaped door. It's all one. And so, yes, in the iconography, this whole area of Oasis America, there's various innumerable ways that you can show a connection between wind and spirit and life. And then eventually you can tie it to these T-shaped doors.
Beth Spencer is asking, what is the time frame for the appearance of the T-shaped doors and the Chaco Canyon cylinder jars? Do they occur at the same time?
Yes.
Also, yeah. Also, it has
Go on.
has the residue in the cups and the tea in the handle been examined?
All found in the same big, gigantic treasure trove of a room at Chaco Canyon. So you have a T-shaped door that leads into that room. In that room, they found the T-shaped handled cups. In that room, they found the cylinder jars, which contained chocolate, which they found then by chemical analysis of the inside of these cylinder jars that it was chocolate. And then we found out from this that only recently did we find it was chocolate inside these jars. And then we found that obviously they had to bring the chocolate from all the way from deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica. And so that's an amazing late discovery. There's another story here, another element of all of this story in terms of chocolate, is that we found chocolate in cylinder jars in Utah. And those cylinder jars with chocolate in Utah predate the cylinder jars at Chaco by almost 1,000 years. So how is it that chocolate came all the way from the jungles of Mesoamerica, made it all the way up to Utah before we found it 1,000 years later at Chaco? And that's another area that's going to have a lot of study, because nobody knows the answer to that. And so far, the only answers in all the research that we've done so far is the guess that there was a trading post that was developed by Mesoamericans walking in some kind of straight line all the way up to the far north. It was Nevada, not Utah, all the way up to Nevada. And they established this site in Nevada where relatives continued to live there, and their trading folks went straight back from that area to Mesoamerica to carry on long distance trade only with that site in Nevada. And that's how chocolate got all the way to Nevada, while skipping Chaco and everywhere else, we only found out it was 1,000 years later that they had cylinder jars with chocolate. That's a guess. And that's as far as we're going to get so far in terms of researching this, why this site in Nevada had chocolate cylinders containing chocolate way older than these cylinder jars that were found at Chaco. Why wasn't chocolate going north step by step until it got to Nevada? We don't know. And there's going to have to be a lot more research. It's an interesting story, though. Okay, any other questions?
Are there any natural formations that would direct people? I'm just thinking that the distance, if you had a river or something, some way of, naturally connecting the areas. But I'm thinking from like Utah, Nevada, the Southwest area to the Mayan region, there's nothing that would easily connect them that I could think of.
The researchers who've studied this, including Callis, pointed out that there's a number of rivers and riverines,
Okay.
natural areas where traders from Chiapas could easily have reached trading areas in Paquime, for instance. It wasn't so hard for them to get. It was much harder for folks to get from Paquime all the way up to Utah than it was for people in terms of the miles and in terms of ways to get around than it was for, much harder to do that than for Maya folks from Chiapas to trade into, Chihuahua. So that wasn't hard, according to Callis. Lots of connection ways, lots of byways.
Any other questions? Like I said, you're welcome to unmute yourself at this time if you'd like to ask a question or put it in a chat.
And plus any feedback. Was it a good learning experience? How did you feel the lecture went? Always interested in that as a teacher.
Well, I for one want to visit the Southwest now.
Okay, so I want to remind everybody that this lecture emanates from the Chicago Archaeological Society. And if you're coming from outside of our membership base and you joined because I sent you the link to this lecture, and you'd like to join the Chicago Archaeological Society, or you'd like to be on my mailing list for the Chicago Archaeological Society, please contact me or the Chicago Archaeological Society, and I'll put you on my mailing list.
So your email address that they should send to?
It's Michael Ruggeri at mac.com. Ruggeri. Michael Ruggeri, Ruggeri at mac.com.
And our website for the society is chicagoarchaeologicalsociety.com.
Okay, so we'll bring this lecture to an end. Next month, I will be talking about, for the Chicago Archaeological Society at the end of July, the two pre-Clovis sites, the only two pre-Clovis sites so far that we know about that have human DNA evidence in them that we can date as pre-Clovis are Monte Verde down in southern Chile and Paisley Cave in Oregon. So those are the only two sites that have proven human DNA pre-Clovis evidence. There's a lot of sites that are called pre-Clovis, but only two that have human DNA evidence. So I want to talk in my next lecture about what that means. Why have we only found two sites with human DNA evidence that are pre-Clovis? How did they determine this? What is that story about? And as part of that lecture, I'll be talking about sites in the pre-Clovis era now, pre-Clovis area of study that come very close to human DNA evidence, but not quite there as Monte Verde and Paisley Cave are. So that will be the subject of my next special Chicago Archaeological Society lecture at the end of July, and I'll send that link out to everybody I sent this link out to. Okay.
Hey, keep an eye out for your email, and keep an eye on the website, chicagoarchaeologicalsociety.com, for the upcoming events and Mike's upcoming talk. Thank you everyone for coming out. This has been a really good lecture, really great event. All right, thank you everyone. Signing off now.
Thank you.